Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack a single but remarkably insightful source. It's this short piece of writing titled "The Price of Value: Rethinking Consumer Demand in Development."
Yeah, and it documents a market-based sanitation program in rural Ethiopia from back in 2018, which, might sound like a super niche topic at
Right,
first.
totally.
But the paradigm shift contained in this case study is just massive. I mean, it fundamentally challenges our standard assumptions about human behavior, basic economics, and, well, what we actually value when we make decisions.
It really does. It's almost like a master class in behavioral economics.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
By focusing entirely on this one specific project, the author manages to they dismantle this decades-old mindset that has dominated not just international development, but arguably modern consumer marketing as well.
Yeah. So to kind of set the stage for you, the listener, imagine you were trying to sell a really high-quality, life-improving product to a community. You've done the research, you know the product works, and you know it will genuinely elevate their daily lives.
Right, you're ready to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before you even get a chance to pack your bags and head out into the field, every single financial expert, project manager, and stakeholder sitting around the boardroom table tells you, don't bother.
Yeah, the classic roadblock.
Right. They say, these people are entirely too poor to buy this. It's a complete waste of time. So what do? Do you just pack up your pitch and leave?
Yeah.
Or do you look a little closer at what's actually going on?
And that response, that don't bother response, is so common. The traditional development model usually responds to that scenario by, well, immediately lowering the quality of the product just to match the perceived low income of the target demographic.
Which creates a scenario we are all incredibly used to, right? Whenever we think about standard development work or even marketing to lower income demographics here at home, the underlying assumption is almost always akin to a bargain bin discount store.
Oh, yeah, the bargain bin mentality.
You know the vibe. The harsh fluorescent lights, everything piled in cardboard boxes, and the unwritten rule is that cheaper is universally better. We just assume that people with limited means only care about the absolute lowest possible price. We are so wired to believe that price dictates behavior.
We really are. But to understand how the author of our source proved that assumption completely backwards, we have to look closely at the baseline reality on the ground in rural Ethiopia.
Right. What were they actually dealing with?
Well, the product the team was introducing wasn't some flimsy temporary fix or a basic pit latrine.
Oh.
They were bringing in a highly durable, odor-free composting toilet.
And let's be super specific about the technical aspects here. Because this toilet was designed to be assembled really quickly, it safely managed household waste through this composting mechanism, and it utilized smooth, high-quality plastics that were easy to clean.
Yeah, it wasn't cheap material.
Right, it was a massive upgrade in terms of sanitation infrastructure. But the price tag for this unit was between 10,000 and 12,000 Ethiopian birr.
And to put 12,000 birr in context for rural Ethiopia in 2018,
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about a sum that equated to several months of discretionary income for a typical farming household.
Wow, so several months. That is not a small amount.
No, not at all. It's not a casual Friday purchase. It's a major capital investment, one that might require, liquidating assets, selling livestock, or even dipping into deep community savings.
Which honestly totally explains the overwhelmingly negative reaction from the stakeholders funding this initiative. The quotes from the source highlight their definitive stance. They were saying things like, no one will buy it, it's too expensive, and people simply can't afford it.
Which makes sense from their perspective.
Right, let's look at this through the lens of those stakeholders for a second. Because to be fair to them, isn't basic math just basic math? If a household's annual disposable income is heavily constrained, and the cost of the toilet represents this huge percentage of that income, looking at a spreadsheet and concluding the funds simply do not exist seems entirely rational. I mean, you can't spend money you don't have, right?
On a spreadsheet, yes. It looks like a completely immovable barrier. And that perspective is really the bedrock of the traditional social impact mindset.
The spreadsheet mindset.
Exactly. Historically, development projects hyperfixate on absolute cost because, well, they're often driven by donor metrics.
Oh, interesting. What kind of metrics?
Well, a foundation wants an annual report stating they provided sanitation to, say, 50,000 people. And To hit that massive volume, the unit cost has to be driven down to near zero. So the prevailing wisdom is to subsidize the product, give it away, or just engineer it to be so unbelievably cheap that price is no longer even a factor.
Because the underlying assumption there is that the people being helped have exactly zero discretionary income. Every penny is supposedly allocated to sheer survival.
Right. And the problem with that traditional aid model is that it views communities as this monolithic block of poverty. It sees them as recipients of charity, not complex consumers.
That's a huge distinction. Charity recipient versus consumer.
It really is, because when you view someone merely as an aid recipient, you just assume their only purchasing criteria is free. And that mindset inadvertently strips away their agency. It ignores their personal desires, their social aspirations, and their complex decision-making processes. It basically reduces their entire existence to a neat math equation.
Man, that's heavy. But the author of our source, they weren't convinced by the boardroom's absolute certainty, were they?
No, not at all. Instead of just accepting the spreadsheet, they actually spent months living and working in these rural communities.
And that ground-level observation is what completely shattered the math equation.
Exactly, because they noticed something really interesting. Many of the exact same households the stakeholders had categorized as definitively too poor to invest in sanitation, well, they had satellite dishes mounted prominently right on their roofs.
Wait, really? Satellite dishes?
Yep. And the detail that makes this observation a true, light bulb moment is the cost. Those satellite systems factoring in the dish, the receiver, and the television often cost significantly more than the 12,000 burr toilet the team was trying to sell.
Oh, wow. So the money wasn't non-existent at all. It was actively circulating in the ecosystem. It was simply being allocated to something entirely different.
Precisely. And this highlights the most profound mistake made in development work and, frankly, in a vast majority of corporate marketing, too. The biggest mistake isn't underestimating people's income. It is underestimating what they actually value.
Okay, let's apply some behavioral science to this.
Yeah.
Because human economics is rarely about simple addition and subtraction,
Yeah.
right? It's almost entirely about priorities and perceived value. Think about a super relatable scenario for a second. The broke college student. We all know someone who lives exclusively on cheap instant ramen. They complain constantly about the cost of textbooks, and they wear shoes that are literally falling apart, yet they are walking around with a brand new $1,000 smartphone in their pocket.
Yeah, we've all seen that.
Right. If you strictly analyze their grocery budget, you conclude they absolutely cannot afford a premium phone. But they magically find the money.
And that phenomenon connects directly to a concept in behavioral economics known as present bias, coupled with how humans assign value to social capital.
Break that down a bit for us.
Sure. So the college student prioritizes the immediate social connection, the high-quality camera, and the undeniable status symbol of the phone over, say, a varied diet. And in the Ethiopian communities, the satellite dish serves a remarkably similar function.
Because a satellite dish in a remote area is, it's far more than just a piece of metal pulling down a signal.
Yeah. Oh, entirely. It represents a tangible connection to the global conversation. It provides daily entertainment. And perhaps most importantly, it is a highly visible signal of upward mobility to the neighbors.
Right. It's a status symbol.
Exactly. These are deep-seated psychological and social needs. Regardless of income bracket, people will stretch their budgets, they'll organize savings groups, and pool resources to attain items that fulfill those immediate, high-value desires.
So the roadblock for the sanitation team wasn't that the community couldn't afford a 12,000 burr toilet. The roadblock was that they were offering a product the community did not value.
Exactly.
But, okay, knowing the money exists is really only half the battle, right? Realizing a family has the funds for a satellite dish does not magically compel them to turn around and spend those funds on a composting toilet.
No, it definitely doesn't.
So the narrative of our source pivots here, because the team had to figure out a way to capture that discretionary income. But crucially, they flat out refused to change the price tag. They didn't engineer a cheaper, inferior toilet to meet the boardroom's bargain bin expectations.
Right. They chose instead to lean entirely into the psychology of perceived value. If a consumer doesn't buy based strictly on the lowest price, but rather on what feels worth the investment the team's objective was to drastically increase the perceived worth of the toilet without altering its physical components at all.
Okay, so this requires looking at the mechanics of how they actually executed this shift in the field. Because historically, sanitation is sold through the lens of public health.
Oh, almost exclusively.
Yeah, like you send a clinic worker to a village with a chart showing transmission rates of cholera and dysentery. You talk about invisible germs. You talk about preventing
The
sickness.
team abandoned that approach completely.
Really, completely.
Yep. Instead of public health workers lecturing on disease, they utilized local sales agents who focused entirely on the immediate, tangible experience of owning the product.
So what do they show them?
Well, they ran demonstrations showing how the smooth plastic was just effortless to wipe down. They highlighted how the composting mechanism securely sealed away waste, meaning there were no flies buzzing around the property.
Oh, I see. So they shifted the messaging away from health and moved it towards dignity. They painted this vivid picture of a cleaner home and the convenience of not having to walk to a communal latrine in the middle of the night.
Exactly. And we really have to unpack why disease prevention is historically such a weak catalyst for consumer behavior. And this isn't just in developing nations, it's globally.
Yeah, you'd think not getting sick would be a huge motivator. Why isn't it?
It comes down to another behavioral economics concept called time discounting. Humans naturally heavily discount the value of future, abstract rewards like not getting sick 5 years from now in favor of immediate concrete rewards.
Ah, I get it. Disease prevention is essentially the promise of an invisible negative. Like, you are asking someone to part with several months' wages today to prevent a purely hypothetical scenario in the future.
Exactly. While dignity offers an immediate positive, a cleaner home, a lack of flies, and a bathroom that doesn't smell terrible when you host guests for dinner, those are instant, highly visible upgrades to someone's daily lived experience.
That makes so much sense.
Right. By selling status, comfort, and pride in one's home, the sanitation team began operating on the exact same psychological wavelength that sells satellite dishes.
Which forces us to ask the ultimate question here. So what does this all mean in practice? Like, did this behavioral approach translate into actual sales?
Yep.
It is one thing to run a clever marketing campaign, but it is a whole different story to convince a rural farming household to hand over 12,000 birds based purely on the promise of dignity.
Well, the outcome recorded in the source was pretty remarkable. Families actually began purchasing the units.
Oh, wow. So it worked.
It worked incredibly well. The value-based pitch worked so effectively that the product caught on organically, to the point where the community actually assigned it a specific nickname in their local language. They started calling it the odorless toilet.
That specific nickname is so fascinating to me. Like, they didn't call it the cholera prevention toilet or the health toilet. The community named the product after the immediate, tangible value it brought to their daily lives, the literal elimination of bad smells.
Yes.
And language shapes reality, right? By giving it their own term, the community took psychological ownership of the product.
They absolutely did. And the author notes a really profound realization following this success. Think about it, the physical plastic of the toilet hadn't changed at all. The community hadn't suddenly discovered a new cash crop and become drastically wealthier overnight.
So nothing physically changed.
Nothing. The absolute only variable that changed in the entire equation was the value proposition.
The story being told about the product finally aligned with what the consumers actually cared about. And this just perfectly demonstrates a fundamental law of consumer behavior. People rarely buy something simply because it is cheap. They buy it because it feels worth the cost.
And to test that theory, just consider your own purchasing habits.
Right. Think about this in your own life listening to this. Think about a time you needed a specific tool or a piece of software or maybe an appliance for your kitchen. We have all had moments where we opted for the absolute cheapest version available just to save a few dollars.
Oh, guilty as charged.
Right. Me
Yeah.
too. And what usually happens, the cheap tool breaks on the first use, or the software is incredibly frustrating and it lacks the features you actually need. So you end up throwing the cheap version away and you spend more money to buy the premium version anyway, because the premium version actually gets the job done.
Exactly. You end up spending more in the long run trying to be cheap.
The initial purchase wasn't driven by value, it was driven by the illusion of savings.
Yep.
Ultimately, we don't really want cheap. We want our investments to be worth our time and money. We want actual value.
And if we, as consumers, operate with that level of discernment, why would we assume a farming family in rural Ethiopia operates any differently? Why would we assume they prefer a flimsy, cheap pit latrine that requires constant maintenance over a durable, odorless system that elevates their daily living standard simply because the annual income is lower?
We shouldn't. And that is the massive reframe the author provides here. It forces us to zoom out from the specific logistics of a 12,000 birr toilet in Ethiopia and look at the broader universal implications.
Right, this is bigger than toilets.
Much bigger. The source points out that this experience fundamentally reshaped the author's approach to development and market systems as a whole.
Because the underlying principle just isn't confined to sanitation. Exactly. The source explicitly notes that whether an organization is attempting to introduce solar energy panels or mobile financial services, agricultural technology, clean water solutions, the core principle remains identical. The traditional starting question of can people afford this is fundamentally flawed.
It has to be replaced with a much more challenging question, right?
Yeah.
Have we created something people genuinely want?
Yes. That single question bridges the massive gap between traditional social impact charity and ethical market systems, because the old charity model treats people in developing areas as passive vessels.
Right, like they're just waiting for handouts.
Exactly. An organization in a distant capital decides what a community supposedly needs, manufactures the absolute cheapest possible version to satisfy their own donor metrics, drops it off, and basically expects gratitude.
While the market approach, however, forces accountability.
It really does. It treats those same people as discerning consumers. It acknowledges their agency, their personal preferences, and their demand for quality. Because if you build something they don't want, they simply won't buy it. It forces the organization to actually listen to the community.
It's the ultimate sign of respect, really. Providing a cheap, inferior product or dumbing down a concept because you assume the audience won't grasp the premium version operates on this baseline assumption that the audience has no standards.
Exactly.
Conversely, offering someone something of high value and trusting the audience's ability to evaluate it assumes they are smart enough to recognize a good investment when they see one. It treats the consumer as an equal.
It's about embedding dignity, not just into the physical product, but into the entire methodology of how we interact with the people we are trying to serve. When an organization stops obsessing over affordability and starts focusing on desirability, they are forced to understand the daily frustrations, the social dynamics, and the aspirations of the community.
Such as realizing that abstract disease statistics mean very little compared to the very real desire to host your neighbors in a home that smells pleasant. The stakeholders in the boardroom failed initially because their product's value was misaligned with the community's actual desires. No amount of price subsidization would have created a sustainable long-term market without that fundamental alignment.
The author's journey proves that human behavior is consistent regardless of geography or income. Value will always drive adoption.
Always. Let's quickly recap the journey from today's source. We started with a 12,000 birr composting toilet in rural Ethiopia that traditional spreadsheets definitively proved was an impossible sell. The math dictated the community was simply too poor.
Right.
But a ground-level observation of expensive satellite dishes mounted on roofs proved that perceived value driven by status, connection, and immediate gratification will consistently trump a low price tag.
Every time.
Yeah. By shifting the messaging away from the invisible, future-based fear of disease and focusing entirely on immediate dignity and convenience, the team maintained their price point. The community eagerly bought in, organically named it the odorless toilet, and proved that people aren't looking for the cheapest option. They are looking for what is worth it.
It is such a profound lesson in behavioral economics, and its applications extend far beyond international development. The source asks, have we created something people genuinely want? But let's take that a step further and apply it to you, the listener.
I love this.
Think about the ideas, the new workflows, the projects, or even the skills you are trying to sell to your boss, your clients, or your team right now. Are you secretly relying on making those ideas cheap, fast, or easy just to minimize friction and get buy-in?
Oof, it's a tough question.
It is. What would happen if, instead of constantly trying to lower the cost of entry, you boldly focused on raising the perceived value? Consider your own environment. What is the satellite dish your audience is already happily paying for? And how can you frame your idea to be just as indispensable?
Man, it certainly makes you reconsider the entire bargain bin discount store mentality. Maybe we don't need to slash the price or dumb down the pitch. Maybe we just need to turn on the lights, stop selling invisible statistics, and show people the immediate, tangible worth of what we are offering. Keep asking the big questions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.